The old man stood in the rain like a ghost no one wanted to see. Water streamed down his face, soaking through the thin fabric of his wrinkled suit. Expensive once, maybe, but now just sad. His silver hair clung to his forehead in wet strands, and his eyes, pale blue and distant, stared at nothing. Or everything. It was hard to tell. People rushed past him on Fifth Avenue, their umbrellas a parade of black domes, their faces buried in phones or hidden behind collars. No one looked at him. Not really. A woman in heels swerved around him without breaking stride. A businessman brushed his shoulder and kept walking. A couple laughed as they passed, their voices swallowed by the storm. He might as well have been invisible. And then, she stopped. Before we continue, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. And trust me, this one will make you think twice, because it could happen to anyone. Whitney Clark had been late for her shift at the hospital for the third time this week, her scrubs damp under her jacket, her backpack heavy with textbooks she hadn't had time to open. She should have kept moving. She needed to keep moving. But something in the way the old man stood there, still, lost, drowning, made her feet slow. She looked at him, really looked. His lips were moving. Whitney stepped closer, ignoring the impatient shove of a passerby. "Sir?" Her voice was soft, careful. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer. His mouth kept forming words, but no sound came out. Or maybe the rain was too loud. His hands trembled at his sides, fingers curling and uncurling like he was trying to hold on to something that kept slipping away. She glanced around. Surely someone else would stop. Surely someone who wasn't already late, already exhausted, already drowning in her own problems would... No one stopped. Whitney felt something twist in her chest. Anger, maybe. Or shame. She didn't know anymore. "Sir," she said again, louder this time. She reached out slowly, the way you might approach a frightened animal, and touched his arm. He flinched. His eyes snapped to hers, sharp, suddenly, terrifyingly aware. For a moment she thought he might run, or scream, or collapse. Instead, he whispered, "I don't know where I am." The words hit her like a punch. Whitney's training kicked in before her fear could. Disorientation, confusion. Possible neurological event. She scanned his face for signs of stroke, drooping, asymmetry, slurred speech. Nothing obvious, but his pupils were dilated, his breathing shallow. "Okay," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Okay, that's all right. I'm Whitney. I'm a nurse. Can you tell me your name?" He stared at her like the question was in a language he used to speak but had forgotten. "Your name," she repeated gently. "What's your name?" His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I don't... Whitney's stomach dropped. She pulled out her phone with one hand, keeping the other on his arm. She needed to call 911. This man needed help. Real help, more than she could give him on a rain-soaked sidewalk. But before she could dial, his hand shot out and gripped her wrist. Not hard, not violent, but desperate. "Please," he whispered. "Please don't leave me here." Something in his voice cracked her open. Whitney had seen lost people before. Confused patients in the ER, dementia cases wandering the halls, overdose victims who didn't know their own names. But this felt different. This felt like watching someone drown in plain sight while the world walked by. She looked into his eyes, those pale, frightened eyes, and made a decision that would change everything. "I won't," she said. "I promise. But we need to get you out of the rain, okay? Can you walk?" He nodded slowly. She guided him toward the awning of a closed boutique, her hand steady on his elbow. He moved like someone who had forgotten how his body worked, each step tentative, uncertain. When they reached the shelter, she helped him sit on the ground, his back against the glass window. Whitney crouched beside him, shrugging off her jacket and draping it over his shoulders. He was shaking, From cold or fear, she couldn't tell. Maybe both. "I'm going to call for help," she said. "They'll take you somewhere safe. Somewhere warm." "No." The word came out sharp, panicked. His hand found hers and held on. "No hospitals. No police." Whitney froze. "Why not?" He didn't answer. His gaze darted to the street, scanning the crowd like he was searching for someone, or hiding from someone. A chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the rain. "Sir, if you're in trouble—" "I don't know," he interrupted, his voice breaking. "I don't know if I'm in trouble. I don't know anything." His fingers tightened around hers. "I just know I can't go back. Not yet." Back where? The question burned in Whitney's throat, but she swallowed it. Pushing him now would only make things worse. She'd seen it before. Trauma, shock, the mind protecting itself by shutting down. "All right," she said quietly. "No hospitals, but you need to get dry and warm, and we need to figure out who you are." He looked at her like she'd just offered him the world. "You'll help me?" Whitney thought about her shift, her textbooks, her rent, which was already 2 weeks late. She thought about all the reasons she should walk away, should let someone else handle this, should protect herself first. But when she looked at him, this lost, terrified old man that everyone else had decided wasn't worth seeing, she knew there was only one answer she could give. "Yeah," she said. "I'll help you." They sat under that awning for 20 minutes while Whitney tried to piece together the fragments. His suit, though soaked and wrinkled, was tailored. Expensive. The kind of thing you didn't buy off a rack. His shoes were Italian leather, scuffed, but still recognizable. Even his watch, a simple silver band, looked like it cost more than her car. "Do you remember where you were before this?" she asked. He closed his eyes. A room. White walls. Bright lights. A hospital? Maybe. I don't... He pressed his palms against his temples. There were voices, arguing, and then... nothing. Just walking. And rain. Whitney's mind raced. Memory loss. Expensive clothes. Fear of hospitals and police. None of it added up, but all of it screamed danger. She should have been scared. She probably was. But beneath the fear was something else. A stubborn, foolish need to help this man who everyone else had decided didn't matter. "Do you have a wallet?" she asked. "ID? Anything in your pockets?" He patted his jacket slowly, like he was remembering how pockets worked. His hand disappeared inside and emerged with... nothing. "Empty," he whispered. "Everything's empty." Whitney bit her lip. No ID, no phone, no memory. This was beyond her, way beyond her. She needed to call someone, get him professional help, do this the right way. But then he looked at her again, and she saw something in his eyes that stopped her cold. Gratitude. Pure, desperate gratitude. Like she was the first person in a very long time who had seen him as human. "All right," Whitney said, making another decision she'd probably regret. "Here's what we're going to do. My apartment is 10 blocks from here. You can get dry, get warm, and then we'll figure this out, okay?" "Okay." She helped him to his feet. He was taller than she'd realized, broad-shouldered despite his age. There was strength in him still, buried beneath the confusion and fear. They walked slowly through the rain, Whitney keeping one hand on his arm, guiding him through the crowd that still refused to see him. Twice, he stumbled. Twice, she steadied him. "Thank you," he murmured at one point. "Thank you for stopping." "Don't thank me yet," Whitney said, trying to smile. You haven't seen my apartment. He almost laughed. Almost. By the time they reached her building, a rundown walk-up in a neighborhood gentrification hadn't reached yet. The rain had softened to a drizzle. Whitney led him up 3 flights of stairs, his breathing labored but steady, and unlocked the door to her studio. It wasn't much. A bed shoved in one corner, a kitchenette in another, textbooks and medical journals scattered across every surface. But it was warm, and dry, and safe. "Bathroom's there," she said, pointing. "I'll find you some clothes." He nodded and disappeared behind the door. Whitney stood in the middle of her apartment, suddenly aware of what she'd just done. She'd brought a stranger, a man she knew nothing about who might be dangerous, who might be lying, into her home. Her phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor. "Where are you?" She should go. She should leave him here and go to work and pretend this never happened. Instead, she texted back, "Family emergency. I'll make up the shift." The lie came easily. Too easily. She dug through her closet and found an oversized sweatshirt and sweatpants her ex had left behind. They'd be big on the old man, but they'd do. She set them outside the bathroom door and knocked. "Clothes," she called. "Thank you." While he changed, Whitney made tea. Her hands shook as she poured the water, adrenaline finally catching up with her. What was she doing? What was she thinking? The bathroom door opened. He stepped out, transformed. The wet, lost ghost was gone. In his place stood a man who looked different. Cleaner, calmer, but still deeply, profoundly afraid. "Better?" Whitney asked, handing him a mug. "Better." He wrapped his hands around the warmth. "I'm sorry. For all of this. For—" "Don't." She sat on the edge of her bed. "Just drink your tea, and then we'll figure out who you are." He sat in her desk chair, his movements careful, deliberate. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, this strange, impossible pair brought together by rain and kindness and the fact that she'd been the only one to stop. "Why did you?" he asked suddenly. "Why did you stop?" Whitney thought about it, about her grandmother, who'd raised her to see people, really see them, about all the times she'd been invisible herself, overlooked, dismissed, about the small, stubborn belief that maybe kindness mattered, even when the world said it didn't. "Because someone should have," she said simply. He stared at her like she'd just said something profound. And then his eyes widened. His mug slipped from his hands, tea spilling across the floor. "What?" Whitney jumped up. "What's wrong?" He was staring at the wall behind her, at the small TV mounted there, currently showing the muted evening news. "That's—" His voice was barely a whisper. "That's me." Whitney turned. On the screen, a news banner scrolling across the bottom. Breaking. Billionaire tech mogul Richard Cross missing. Family fears kidnapping. And above it, a photo. The same pale blue eyes, the same silver hair, the same face. Whitney's blood turned to ice. The old man she'd brought into her home, the lost, confused stranger everyone had ignored, was one of the richest men in the world. Whitney couldn't breathe. The room tilted, or maybe she did. She couldn't tell anymore. Her eyes darted between the TV screen and the man sitting in her apartment, wearing her ex's sweatpants, holding a mug of cheap tea like it was the most precious thing in the world. Richard Cross. Richard Cross. The name echoed in her head, pulling up fragments of information she'd absorbed without really paying attention. Tech billionaire. Self-made. Started in his garage and built an empire worth $40 billion. She'd seen his face on magazine covers in the hospital waiting room, heard his name on the news when his company's stock jumped or fell. And now he was in her apartment. Lost. confused, terrified. "You're—" the words stuck in her throat. "You're Richard Cross." He stared at the screen, his face pale as snow. "I am?" The question hit her like cold water. He didn't remember. He genuinely, honestly, didn't remember who he was. Whitney's nursing instincts kicked through the shock. Retrograde amnesia. Could be trauma-induced, could be neurological, could be... Her phone buzzed. Then again, and again. She glanced down. News alerts flooding her screen. Billionaire Richard Cross, missing for 8 hours. Family offers $5 million reward for information FBI investigating possible kidnapping, $5 million. Whitney's hand trembled. $5 million just for information. She could pay off her student loans, her grandmother's medical bills. She could actually breathe for the first time in years. All she had to do was make a phone call. She looked up at Richard Cross, at the man who'd begged her not to leave him, who'd held her hand like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world, and felt something twist in her chest. "Whitney?" His voice was small, frightened. "What does it say?" She should tell him. She should call the number on the screen, collect the reward, let his family handle this. It was the smart thing, the safe thing, the right thing. Instead, she turned off the TV. "It says you've been missing for 8 hours," she said carefully. "Your family is looking for you." Relief flooded his face. "My family." He said it like a prayer. "I have a family? A wife, 2 sons, according to the news." He closed his eyes, searching for something in the darkness behind them. I can't see their faces. I can't remember." His voice cracked. "Why can't I remember?" Whitney sat beside him, every instinct telling her to keep her distance, to protect herself. But she couldn't watch him break apart alone. "Memory loss can happen for a lot of reasons," she said gently. "Trauma, head injury, extreme stress. Sometimes the brain shuts down to protect itself." "From what?" "I don't know, but someone does." She pulled out her phone. "We should call them. Your family. They're worried." "No." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Not hard, but desperate. "Please, not yet." "Why not?" "Because..." He searched for words that wouldn't come. "Because I'm afraid." "Of what?" "I don't know." His eyes met hers, and in them she saw something that stopped her cold. Not confusion, not disorientation, terror. Pure, absolute terror. "What if I ran?" he whispered. "What if I walked out into that rain on purpose? What if there's a reason I can't remember and calling them brings me back to whatever I was running from?" Whitney's pulse quickened. She thought about the arguing voices he'd mentioned, the white room, the fear of hospitals and police. "You think someone hurt you?" "I think..." He released her wrist, his hand shaking. "I think I don't know who to trust, except you." The weight of those words settled over her like a blanket. "You don't even know me," Whitney said. "I know you stopped when no one else did. I know you brought me somewhere safe when you had every reason not to. I know you're the only person in 8 hours who's looked at me like I'm human." He swallowed hard. "That has to mean something." It did mean something. Whitney just wasn't sure if it meant she was kind or stupid. Her phone buzzed again. Another alert. Another reminder of the $5 million that could change her life. She turned off the notifications. "All right," she said, making yet another decision she'd probably regret. "We don't call, not yet. But we need to figure out what happened to you. And we need to do it before someone else does." "How?" Whitney stood, her mind already racing. You said you remember a white room. Bright lights, arguing voices. Does any of that feel like a specific place? Richard closed his eyes again, his brow furrowed in concentration. Clinical. Everything was clinical. And cold. The floor was... His eyes snapped open. Marble. White marble. A hospital? Maybe. Or... He trailed off, something flickering across his face. Fear again. Or somewhere that wanted to look like one. A chill ran down Whitney's spine. What does that mean? I don't know. But it felt wrong. The whole place felt wrong. Whitney's phone buzzed one more time before she could silence it. But this time, it wasn't a news alert. It was a text from an unknown number. We know he's with you. Whitney's blood turned to ice. She stared at the screen, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. She'd turned off her location. She hadn't posted anything. She hadn't told anyone. How could they possibly? Another text. 317 Morrison Street, apartment 3B. Interesting choice. Her address. They knew her address. What's wrong? Richard stood, his voice sharp with concern. Whitney, what is it? She showed him the screen, her hand trembling. His face went white. We need to leave. Now. Who is this? Who's texting me? I don't know, but... He grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. If someone found us this fast, if they know where you live, we are not safe here. Do you understand? Whitney nodded numbly. Her training, her instincts, her rational mind, all of it screamed that this was insane, that she should call the police, that she should get as far away from this man as possible. But something deeper, something primal, told her he was right. They weren't safe. Another text. Don't run. We just want to talk. People who just want to talk don't track you down, Whitney said, her voice steadier than she felt. They call. Richard was already moving, grabbing his wetsuit from where she'd draped it over a chair. Do you have a car? A 10-year-old Honda with a broken taillight. Perfect. No one tracks old Hondas. He pulled on his jacket, still damp, his movements suddenly sharp and decisive. The confused old man was gone. In his place was someone else, someone who knew how to run. Whitney shoved her feet into sneakers, grabbed her backpack, her keys, her phone. Leave the phone, Richard said. What? They're tracking it. Leave it. She stared at him. How do you know that? I don't, but I'm not willing to bet your life on it. His eyes met hers, clear and focused for the first time since she'd found him. Trust me. Please. Whitney looked at her phone. Her entire life was on that phone. Her contacts, her photos, her everything. She set it on the counter. Let's go. They took the back stairs, Richard moving faster than she'd thought possible for a man his age. His breathing was labored but controlled, his hand steady on the railing. When they reached the alley behind her building, Whitney led him to her car, a beat-up Honda Civic that had seen better days a decade ago. She unlocked it, started the engine, which coughed twice before turning over, and pulled out onto the street just as a black SUV turned onto Morrison. Down! Richard hissed. Whitney slumped in her seat, her heart hammering, watching in the rear-view mirror as the SUV slowed in front of her building. Keep driving, Richard said quietly. Normal speed. Don't attract attention. She forced herself to breathe, to keep her hands steady on the wheel, to drive like everything was fine even though nothing was fine. The SUV didn't follow, but as they turned the corner, Whitney saw two men in dark suits step out and enter her building. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God, this is really happening. You're doing great. Richard's voice was calm, anchoring. Just keep driving. Head toward the highway. The highway? Where are we going? Away. It wasn't an answer, but it was all they had. Whitney drove, her mind spinning. 2 hours ago, she'd been late for her shift. 2 hours ago, her biggest problem was rent and textbooks and exhaustion. Now, she was on the run with a billionaire who couldn't remember his own name, being hunted by people who could track her down in minutes. "This is insane," she said. "This is completely insane." "I know. I should turn around. I should take you to the police. You should save your own life," Richard interrupted. "And mine, because whoever those people are, they're not here to help." "How do you know?" "Because—" He trailed off, his brow furrowed. "Because I feel it. In here." He pressed a hand to his chest. "Like a warning I can't quite hear." Whitney glanced at him. In the passing streetlights, his face looked different, older, harder, like pieces of whoever he used to be were starting to break through the confusion. "Are you remembering something?" "I'm remembering." He closed his eyes. "Fear. I'm remembering being afraid for a very long time." The words hung in the air between them. Whitney merged onto the highway, the city lights fading behind them. She had no plan, no destination, no idea what she was doing or why she was doing it. All she knew was that she'd stopped for a lost old man in the rain, and now both their lives were in danger. "I'm sorry," Richard said quietly. "I'm so sorry I brought this to your door. You didn't bring anything. You were just lost." "No." He opened his eyes, and in them she saw something new. Clarity. "I wasn't lost. I was running, and now you're running with me." "From what?" Before he could answer, headlights flooded the rearview mirror. A black SUV. Different one, but unmistakable. And it was gaining fast. "Whitney," Richard said, his voice tight. "Drive faster." She pressed the accelerator, her ancient Honda groaning in protest. The SUV kept coming. "They found us," she whispered. "How did they find us?" Richard's hand went to his wrist, to the simple silver watch he was wearing. His face went pale. "Oh no." "What?" He ripped the watch off and rolled down the window. "What are you doing?" "This." He held up the watch. "It's not just a watch. It's a tracker. It's how they—" He threw it out the window. The watch tumbled across the highway, reflecting headlights for one brief moment before disappearing into the darkness. Whitney watched the SUV in her mirror. It didn't slow, didn't stop to retrieve the watch. It just kept coming. "That wasn't it," she said, her voice hollow. "That wasn't how they found us." Richard stared at her, realization dawning. "Then how?" And that's when Whitney remembered. The jacket. Her jacket that she'd draped over his shoulders back on Fifth Avenue. The jacket she'd grabbed from her apartment. The jacket with her hospital ID badge still clipped to the pocket. Her name, her photo, her information. She'd led them straight to herself. "Oh God," she whispered. "It was me. I did this." The SUV was right behind them now, its headlights blinding in the mirror. And then, it rammed them. The impact threw Whitney forward against her seatbelt, her head snapping back. The Honda swerved wildly, tires screaming, and for one terrible moment she thought they were going to flip. But she held on, straightened the wheel, kept driving. "Exit!" Richard shouted. "Take the next exit!" Whitney jerked the wheel right, barely making the off-ramp, the Honda's tires squealing. The SUV followed, still gaining, still hunting. They were heading into a maze of dark streets and abandoned warehouses. No lights, no people, no witnesses. "They're going to kill us," Whitney said. It wasn't a question. Richard looked at her, his pale blue eyes fierce with something she hadn't seen before. Determination. No, he said. They're not. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something she hadn't seen him grab. Something small and metallic. A key. What is that? I don't know, Richard said. But I remembered it. Just now. In your apartment. It was taped under your kitchen table. Whitney's mind spun. She'd never seen that key before. She'd lived in that apartment for 3 years and never... It's not yours, Richard said quietly. It's mine. I put it there. When? How? I don't know. But I did. Which means... He stared at the key like it held all the answers. Which means I knew. Somehow, some part of me knew I'd need it. Knew I'd need you. The SUV rammed them again, harder this time. The Honda skidded, spun, and slammed into a concrete barrier. Everything went black. Whitney woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of footsteps. Her head throbbed. Her seatbelt cut into her chest. The windshield was cracked, spiderwebbed with fractures that caught the moonlight. Beside her, Richard was slumped against the door, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "Richard," she whispered, shaking him. "Richard, wake up." His eyes fluttered open. "I'm okay. The footsteps got closer. Through the shattered side window, Whitney saw them. 3 men in dark suits, walking slowly toward the wreck like they had all the time in the world. "Out of the car," Richard whispered. "Now!" They moved together, stumbling out into the cold night air. Whitney's legs barely held her, but Richard's hand was steady on her arm, pulling her forward. This way. They ran, or tried to. Stumbled, really, through the dark maze of warehouses, their pursuers' footsteps echoing behind them. "There's nowhere to go," one of the men called out. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "Mr. Cross, we just want to bring you home. Your family is worried." Richard kept pulling Whitney forward, deeper into the shadows. "Stop running, and we'll forget about the girl." She walks away. Clean slate. Whitney's breath caught. They'd let her go. She could walk away from this, go back to her life, pretend none of this happened. She looked at Richard. He looked back, and she saw what he'd seen in her eyes back in the rain, someone worth saving. "No," Whitney called out. "He stays with me." Richard's eyes widened. "Whitney?" "I stopped for you," she said fiercely. "I'm not unstopping now." The footsteps stopped. Silence fell over the warehouses, and then a new voice, female, sharp as broken glass. How touching. A woman stepped out of the shadows, expensive heels clicking on concrete. She was younger than Whitney expected, maybe 40, with perfect hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, Richard," she said. "Remember me?" Richard stared at her, and Whitney watched something break open in his face. Memory. Raw and terrible. "Victoria," he whispered. The woman's smile widened. "So you do remember. Good. That makes this easier." "You did this to me. I saved you," Victoria interrupted. "From yourself. From your guilt. From all those inconvenient questions you kept asking." She stepped closer. "But you just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? You had to run, had to disappear, had to drag this poor girl into our mess." Whitney stepped forward, putting herself between them. "What did you do to him?" Victoria laughed. "I'm his wife, sweetheart. I didn't do anything except try to help my sick husband." Richard's hand found Whitney's shoulder. "She's lying. I'm not sick. I was never sick. She..." His voice broke. She tried to have me declared incompetent, tried to take everything, and when I fought back, I had you committed, Victoria finished calmly, for your own good, until you accepted treatment. You drugged me. You stole my memory. I did what was necessary. Victoria's eyes were cold as winter. And now I'm taking you home. We'll finish the treatment. You'll sign the papers. And then, she glanced at Whitney, then we'll deal with your accomplice. Whitney's blood ran cold. She's not an accomplice. She's just a nurse who kidnapped a mentally incompetent billionaire? Victoria raised an eyebrow. That's how the story will read. That's how the police will see it. Unless, she smiled, unless you come with me now, Richard. Quietly. And I'll make sure she walks away with enough money to keep her mouth shut and her conscience clear. Whitney felt Richard tense beside her. How much? He asked quietly. The $5 million reward, plus another 5 for her trouble. $10 million. Whitney's mind reeled. $10 million to walk away, to let them take him, to save herself. She looked at Richard, at the fear in his eyes, the desperation, the silent plea. Don't leave me. The same words he'd whispered in the rain. Whitney turned back to Victoria. No, she said. Victoria's smile vanished. Excuse me? I said no. He's not going with you, and neither am I. You stupid girl. Do you have any idea what you're... Whitney pulled out the key Richard had given her. What's this? Victoria's face went white. Silence. That's what I thought, Whitney said. Whatever he was hiding from you, whatever he knew that made you lock him up and drug him, it's on this key, isn't it? Give that to me. No. Victoria gestured to her men. They moved forward. Richard pulled Whitney back, his body shielding hers. Touch her, and everyone finds out what you did, what you've been doing, the money you've been moving, the companies you've been selling. All of it. You don't even remember. I remember enough. Richard's voice was steel, and what I don't remember, that key will prove. Victoria stared at them, her perfect mask cracking, and then she laughed, cold and bitter. Fine, run, hide, but you have no phone, no money, no allies, and I have everything. She stepped back into the shadows. You have 48 hours before I report you both to the FBI. Let's see how far your compassion gets you then. She disappeared into the darkness, her men following. Whitney and Richard stood alone in the silence. What just happened? Whitney whispered. We bought ourselves time. Richard looked at the key in her hand. And, hopefully, the truth. What does this key open? I don't know, but someone does. And we need to find them before Victoria finds us. Whitney looked at him. This man she'd stopped for in the rain, this stranger who'd somehow become the most important person in her world in the span of 3 hours. Who? She asked. Who knows? Richard's eyes met hers, and in them she saw the first real memory break through. My son, he said. My youngest son. He's the only one I can trust. Where is he? Richard closed his eyes, searching through the fragments. And then... Boston, he whispered. He's in Boston, and if we can reach him before Victoria does... A siren wailed in the distance. We need to go, Whitney said. Now! They ran into the night, two fugitives bound by kindness and desperation, racing toward a truth that someone had tried very hard to bury. Behind them, the sirens grew louder, and somewhere in the darkness, Victoria made a phone call. They have the key, she said. Find them, and this time, don't bring them back alive. They stole a car, Whitney still couldn't believe she'd done it. Hot-wired an old pickup truck in a warehouse parking lot while Richard kept watch. But desperate times had made her someone she didn't recognize. Someone who broke laws. Someone who ran. Someone who chose a stranger over her entire life. The truck rattled as they merged onto I-95 North, heading toward Boston. 3 hours. That's all the time they had before Victoria's deadline started ticking, before the FBI got involved, before this whole thing became national news. 3 hours to find Richard's son, to unlock whatever truth that key held, to prove that Whitney wasn't a kidnapper and Richard wasn't insane. 3 hours to save both their lives. "Tell me about your son," Whitney said, her hands tight on the wheel. "The one in Boston." Richard stared out the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. "Marcus. His name is Marcus." The words came slowly, painfully, like he was pulling them from deep water. "He's 28, smart, too smart for his own good. He never wanted the company, never wanted the money. He just wanted—" What? To be seen, to be heard, to matter for something other than his last name. Richard's voice cracked. "I failed him. For years I failed him. But you trust him now." "I trust that he loved me once, before I became the man Victoria wanted me to be." He turned to look at her, his eyes haunted. "She changed me, Whitney. Slowly. So slowly I didn't notice. Turned me into someone obsessed with legacy and control and power, and someone who forgot what actually mattered. And Marcus saw it? Marcus was the only one brave enough to say it. 2 years ago, he walked away from everything. The company, the inheritance, the family. Moved to Boston. Started teaching computer science at MIT. Richard smiled sadly. He said he'd rather be poor and honest than rich and compromised. Whitney's throat tightened. He sounds like someone worth finding. He's someone worth saving. Because if Victoria gets to him first, Richard's hands clenched. She'll use him, or hurt him, or make him disappear like she tried to do to me. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, dotted with headlights that could have been anyone. Victoria's men, police, FBI. Whitney's paranoia had become a living thing, sharp and constant. Her phone, the one she'd left behind, would be in Victoria's hands by now. All her contacts, her emails, her entire digital life, dissected and weaponized. "How did you know?" she asked suddenly. "How did you know to hide that key in my apartment?" Richard was quiet for a long moment. "I don't remember the specifics, but I remember the feeling. Desperation. Planning. Knowing that Victoria was closing in and I needed insurance. Needed a backup plan." He looked at her. "I must have researched nurses at hospitals near my office. Found someone who lived alone. Someone who wouldn't notice a stranger breaking in one night to tape something under their kitchen table. That's insane." "I was running out of options, and out of time." He paused. "I'm sorry for violating your home, for dragging you into this. For—" "Stop apologizing," Whitney interrupted. "You were desperate. You were trying to survive. I get it. You shouldn't have to get it. You should be at work right now, living your life, not running from people who want to kill us both." Whitney glanced at him. At this man who'd been powerful enough to build empires and broken enough to hide keys in strangers' apartments. Who'd been so alone that his only escape plan was to hope that someone, anyone, would stop for him in the rain. "Maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said quietly. Richard stared at her like she'd said something impossible. Before he could respond, her stomach growled, loud and unmistakable. Despite everything, the fear, the danger, the insanity, Richard laughed. Actually laughed. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Whitney thought about it. "Yesterday? Maybe?" We need to stop. We can't stop. Victoria's men could catch us whether we're hungry or not. We need energy, clear heads, and 5 minutes of feeling human again. He pointed to an exit sign ahead. Small town, gas station, in and out. Whitney hesitated. Every instinct screamed to keep driving, but her hands were shaking, her vision blurring at the edges. She was running on adrenaline and terror, and that well was running dry. 5 minutes, she agreed. The gas station was a lonely fluorescent island in the darkness. Whitney parked the stolen truck at the far edge of the lot, away from the lights, and they went inside together. A bored teenager behind the counter didn't even look up from his phone. They moved through the aisles like ghosts, grabbing water, granola bars, anything quick and portable. Richard paused in front of the coffee machine, and for a moment, Whitney saw something shift in his expression. Memory. "I used to do this," he whispered. "Before everything. Before Victoria. I'd drive out to small towns and just disappear for a few hours. Drink terrible gas station coffee and pretend I was someone normal. You miss it. I miss knowing who I was." He filled 2 cups, his hands steady. "Now I don't even know what's real. What memories are mine and what she planted there with those drugs?" Whitney thought about the White Room, the arguing voices, the systematic erasure of a man's identity. "We'll figure it out," she said. "We'll find Marcus. We'll unlock whatever's on that key, and we'll prove what she did to you. And if we can't, then we run further. We hide better. The bell above the door chimed. 2 men walked in. Dark suits, expensive shoes, eyes that swept the store with predatory efficiency. Whitney's blood froze. "Don't look at them," Richard murmured. "Act normal." They moved toward the counter, Whitney's heart hammering so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. She set down their items, pulled out cash from Richard's jacket, money she'd grabbed from her apartment in those frantic moments before they ran. The teenager rang them up, still barely looking. Behind them she heard one of the men speaking quietly into a phone. "Gas station! Route 44, checking now!" Whitney forced herself to breathe, to stay calm, to not run screaming for the door. The teenager handed her the change. "Have a good night." "You too." They walked toward the exit, slow, casual, just 2 normal people buying snacks at midnight. One of the men stepped into their path. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Have you seen this man?" He held up a phone. On the screen, Richard's face, the same photo from the news. Whitney's mind raced. Lie. Tell the truth. Scream. Run. 1,000 options, none of them good. "No," she said. "Sorry." The man's eyes narrowed. He looked at Richard, at his silver hair, his pale blue eyes, his face that was identical to the photo even under the harsh fluorescent lights. Richard looked right back at him, calm, unafraid. "Is there a reward?" Richard asked. The man blinked. "What?" "A reward. For information. I saw the news earlier. $5 million, right?" Richard leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Between you and me, I think I saw him. About an hour ago, heading south, with some young guy," looked scared out of his mind. The man studied Richard's face. Whitney could see him comparing, calculating, deciding. "South?" the man repeated. "Yeah, I-95 south, driving an old Honda. I only remember because my wife has the same car." Richard smiled. "That's worth something, right? Even just a tip?" The man stepped back, speaking into his phone again. "Possible sighting. I-95 south. Honda Civic." He looked at Richard one more time, then nodded. "Thanks for your help." "Anytime." They walked out into the night. Whitney didn't breathe until they were back in the truck, pulling out of the lot, heading north while Victoria's men raced south. "How did you do that?" she whispered. "I don't know." Richard's hands were shaking now, the adrenaline crash hitting him. "I just knew what to say, knew how to lie. Like I've done it before." "Have you?" "I must have, to survive this long with Victoria." He looked at her. "I must have learned how to become someone else, someone who could hide in plain sight." Whitney thought about that, about the man he'd been, powerful, controlled, building empires, and the man he'd become, lost, desperate, running for his life. Which one was real? Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe people were just the sum of their choices, and Richard had chosen to survive, just like she was choosing now. They reached Boston just as dawn broke over the city. Whitney had driven straight through, her eyes burning, her body running on pure determination. Richard had tried to stay awake with her, but exhaustion had won. He slept fitfully, murmuring words she couldn't quite hear. Names, maybe. Warnings. Apologies. She pulled over at a rest stop on the outskirts of the city and gently shook him awake. "We're here," she said. "Where does Marcus live?" Richard rubbed his eyes, orienting himself. "Cambridge, near the campus. I don't remember the exact address, but—" He closed his eyes, searching. "Porter Square. He has an apartment above a bookstore." "That's not much to go on. It's all I have." Whitney pulled out a crumpled map from the glove compartment, thank God for old trucks and people who didn't trust GPS, and traced the route to Cambridge. 20 minutes, maybe less. They were so close. But as they pulled back onto the highway, Whitney saw something that made her stomach drop. A checkpoint. State police, stopping every car. "They're looking for us," Richard said quietly. "We can't turn around. It'll look suspicious." "And if we go through?" Whitney looked at him, at his distinctive silver hair, his recognizable face, the exhaustion that couldn't hide who he was. "We need a disguise." They pulled into a strip mall parking lot. A 24-hour pharmacy glowed in the early morning light. Inside, they moved quickly. Hair dye, cheap reading glasses, a Red Sox cap. Different clothes from the clearance rack, a flannel shirt and jeans for Richard, a hoodie for Whitney. They changed in the bathroom, and when Richard emerged, he looked different. His hair was dark brown now, the gray erased. The glasses softened his features, the cap hid his face. "You look like someone's dad," Whitney said. "I am someone's dad." He smiled sadly. "I just hope he still remembers me." They bought coffee and breakfast sandwiches, playing the part of tired travelers, and headed back to the truck. The checkpoint was still there, but now they were just two ordinary people in an old truck. Not worth a second glance. The state trooper waved them through without even checking IDs. Whitney's hands didn't stop shaking until they were miles past. Porter Square was waking up when they arrived. Students trudging to early classes. Coffee shops opening their doors. The smell of fresh bread and autumn leaves. It felt impossibly normal after the nightmare of the past 12 hours. They found the bookstore, a narrow building wedged between a cafe and a vintage record shop. Upstairs windows showed faint light. Someone was home. "What if he doesn't believe us?" Whitney asked. "What if he thinks this is another one of Victoria's tricks?" "Then we show him the key, and we pray it's enough." Richard took a breath. "And if it's not, we run again." They climbed the narrow stairs to the apartment. Richard knocked. Silence. He knocked again, harder. Footsteps, the sound of a chain being unlatched. The door opened. A young man stood there. Marcus. Had to be Marcus. He had Richard's eyes, his strong jawline, but his face was softer, kinder. He wore MIT sweatpants and a t-shirt with equations printed on it, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He stared at Richard for a long moment. "Dad?" Richard's composure shattered. "Marcus. Thank God. I wasn't sure you'd... Are you okay? Jesus Christ, are you okay? The news said you were kidnapped, that someone took you, that..." Marcus pulled him into a fierce hug. "I've been losing my mind." Whitney felt tears prick her eyes. After everything, the fear, the running, the doubt, seeing this moment of pure relief made it all feel worth it. Marcus pulled back, his eyes finding Whitney. "Who are you?" "Whitney Clark. I'm a nurse. I found your father yesterday. He was lost and confused and..." "Victoria," Richard interrupted. "Victoria did this. She's been drugging me, trying to have me declared incompetent so she can take everything. I managed to escape, but I lost my memory. Everything, until Whitney stopped to help me." Marcus's face went hard. "I knew it. I knew something was wrong. When you missed our call last week, when your assistant said you were indisposed..." He stepped back, letting them inside. "Come in, both of you. We need to talk." The apartment was small but comfortable. Books everywhere. Computer equipment that looked expensive. A life built on intellect rather than money. Marcus locked the door behind them and turned to face his father. "What do you need? What can I do?" Richard pulled out the key. "This. I hid this before everything went dark. I think it's evidence, proof of what Victoria's been doing, but I don't know what it opens." Marcus took the key, studying it. His eyes widened. "Oh my God," he whispered. "This is for a safety deposit box. Chase Bank, downtown Boston." He looked up. "Dad, what did you put in there?" "I don't remember. But whatever it is, it's important enough that Victoria is willing to kill to keep it hidden." "Kill?" Marcus's voice rose. "What do you mean, kill?" "She sent men after us, ran us off the road, threatened Whitney's life unless I came back quietly." Richard's hands clenched. "I won't let her hurt anyone else. Not you, not Whitney, not anyone." Marcus paced, his mind clearly racing. Okay. We need a plan. If Victoria knows you have the key..." "She does. Then she'll have people watching the bank, waiting for you to show up." He stopped pacing. "We need a diversion. Something to draw them away while we get inside." "What kind of diversion?" Whitney asked. Marcus looked at her, then at his father, and a slow smile spread across his face. "The kind that uses Victoria's own arrogance against her." He pulled out his phone. "I'm going to make a call, and you're going to trust me." 2 hours later, Whitney stood outside Chase Bank in downtown Boston, watching as armored cars pulled up and security teams mobilized. Marcus had called in a bomb threat, anonymous tip, unconfirmed but credible. The kind of thing banks couldn't ignore. The kind of thing that would empty the building and draw every security resource in a 5-block radius. Inside the chaos, Richard, still disguised, still hidden, slipped through a side entrance with Marcus while the evacuation was in full swing. Whitney was the lookout, the warning system. If Victoria's men showed up, if anything went wrong, she'd call Marcus's phone. 1 ring. That's all the signal they'd need. She stood across the street, pretending to watch the evacuation like any curious bystander, her heart hammering with every passing second. 5 minutes. 10. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "We're in. Give us 10 more minutes." Whitney looked around. Police were everywhere now. Bomb squad, news crews setting up. This was going to be national television within the hour. And somewhere in that chaos, Victoria's men were watching, waiting. She spotted them. 2 men in suits, standing too still, watching too carefully. They weren't looking at the bank. They were looking at her. Whitney's breath caught. They knew. Somehow, they knew. She pulled out her phone to warn Marcus. and felt cold metal press against her spine. "Don't," a voice whispered in her ear. "Don't move. Don't scream. Don't do anything except walk with me very slowly to that car." A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Whitney's mind raced. If she got in that car, she was dead. Or worse, leverage. They'd use her to force Richard to surrender. She thought about her grandmother's last words before she died. "Be brave when it matters most." This mattered most. Whitney spun, driving her elbow into her captor's stomach with every ounce of nursing school self-defense training she had. He doubled over, gasping, and she ran, straight toward the police line, toward the cameras, toward witnesses and safety, and strong hands grabbed her from behind. She screamed. Every head turned, cameras swiveled, police shouted. Her captor dragged her backward toward the SUV, but people were running now. Officers were moving. The whole scene was erupting into chaos. And then a shot rang out. Everyone hit the ground. Whitney felt herself released, heard shouting, saw uniforms swarming. When she looked up, her captor was on the ground, hands behind his head, surrounded by police. Someone helped her up. An officer. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Whitney's voice shook. Yes, I'm okay." "Do you know that man?" "Why was he trying to abduct you?" Before she could answer, her phone rang. Marcus. "Whitney? What's happening? We heard the shot." "I'm okay. Did you get it? Did you find what's in the box?" "We found it." His voice was grim. "And Dad was right. This changes everything." They met at Marcus's apartment an hour later. Richard and Marcus had slipped out during the chaos, unnoticed in the evacuation confusion. Whitney had given police a statement, claimed her attacker was an ex-boyfriend, that it wasn't related to the bomb threat, and somehow, miraculously, they'd believed her. Or maybe they were just overwhelmed and didn't want to deal with more complications. Either way, she was free, for now. Richard was waiting when she arrived, his disguise gone, his face pale with exhaustion and something else. Rage. "Show her," he said to Marcus. Marcus pulled out a flash drive. "Everything's on here. Financial records, emails, medical records, video recordings." He looked at Whitney. "Victoria has been systematically drugging Dad for 2 years. Small doses. Enough to cause confusion, memory loss, erratic behavior. Enough to make him look incompetent." "Why?" Whitney asked, though she already knew the answer. "Control, money, power, take your pick." Marcus pulled up files on his laptop. "She's been moving billions out of the company accounts, selling off assets to shell corporations she controls. If Dad had been declared incompetent, she would have had complete control of everything. $50 billion. Whitney felt sick. That's why she tried to have him committed. That's why she erased his memory when he started fighting back. Richard's voice was hollow. "I must have discovered what she was doing. Must have started gathering evidence. So she escalated. Locked me up in a private facility. Drugged me until I couldn't remember my own name." "How did you escape?" Marcus asked. Richard closed his eyes, the memory finally breaking through. "A nurse. Someone on the overnight shift who saw what they were doing. She gave me civilian clothes, told me to run, said she'd call the police once I was gone." He looked at Whitney. "I ran straight into that storm, and I kept running until I couldn't remember why I was running at all." "The nurse?" Whitney asked. "Did Victoria—" "I don't know." Richard's voice cracked. "I don't even know her name, but she saved my life, just like you did." The weight of that settled over the room. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked. "We have the evidence, but Victoria still has resources, money, people who'll do anything she asks. We go public," Richard said. "We give this to every news outlet in the country. We make it impossible for her to hide. She'll claim it's fabricated, that you're unstable, that Whitney kidnapped you and coerced you into making false accusations. Then we let the evidence speak for itself. Richard looked at Whitney. Are you willing to do this? To stand up in front of the world and tell them what happened? Knowing that Victoria will come after you with everything she has? Whitney thought about the past 18 hours, about the terror and the running, and the moments when she'd thought they'd both die. She thought about the old man standing in the rain, about the choice to stop, about every moment since then that had led to this one. I'm willing, she said. But not for you. For every person who's been made invisible, who's been ignored and erased and hurt by people with power. She met Richard's eyes. Someone has to stop. Someone has to see, and someone has to care enough to do something about it. Richard's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. For everything. For... His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He answered. Victoria's voice was ice and poison. Hello, Richard. I see you found your little insurance policy. Clever. Almost clever enough. It's over, Victoria. I have everything. Every crime, every theft, every... You have copies, she interrupted. Digital copies that any good lawyer will say are fabricated, deep-faked, the desperate inventions of a mentally ill man and his opportunistic kidnapper. The courts take time. And I have 48 hours before you go to the FBI, remember? Her laugh was cold. A lot can happen in 48 hours. A lot of evidence can disappear. A lot of witnesses can become unreliable. If you touch Marcus, I won't touch Marcus. I'll destroy him. His reputation, his career, his entire life. Same with your little nurse friend. Unless what? Unless you come home, sign the papers, accept the treatment, and let this all go away quietly. Victoria paused. You have 24 hours to decide. Tick-tock, Richard. She hung up. The silence in the room was deafening. She's bluffing, Marcus said. She has to be. We have the evidence. We have proof. She's not bluffing, Richard said quietly. I know her. She's already planning her next move. Already finding ways to discredit everything we have. So what do we do? Whitney asked. Richard looked at the flash drive, at the evidence that could free him or destroy everyone he cared about. And then he looked at Whitney, at the woman who'd stopped in the rain, who'd risked everything, who'd reminded him what it meant to be human. We trust, he said. We trust that the truth is stronger than lies, that justice is worth fighting for, that kindness matters more than power. He picked up the flash drive. We go public, now, tonight, before Victoria can stop us. We give this to every journalist, every news outlet, every platform we can find. We flood the world with the truth until there's no room left for her lies. Marcus nodded slowly. I know someone. Investigative journalist, Boston Globe. She's been trying to interview Dad for years. Call her, Richard said. Tell her we're ready to talk. Marcus pulled out his phone. Whitney watched all of this, the decision, the courage, the choice to fight instead of hide, and felt something shift inside her. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, being overlooked, being the person others walked past without seeing. But in the past 18 hours, she'd become someone else. Someone who mattered. Someone who made a difference. Someone who stopped. Whatever happens, she said quietly, I'm with you. Both of you. Until the end. Richard took her hand, squeezed it gently. Thank you, he whispered, for seeing me when no one else would. The interview went live at 8 p.m. Richard Cross, thought to be kidnapped, sitting across from Jennifer Walsh of the Boston Globe, telling the world exactly what his wife had done. The evidence flashed across screens everywhere. Financial records, medical files, video footage of Victoria authorizing his commitment, Emails discussing dosages and symptoms and the timeline for declaring him incompetent. All of it. Every crime. Every betrayal. Laid bare for the world to see. Whitney watched from Marcus's apartment, her heart in her throat. Beside her, Richard's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Other journalists, former colleagues, friends he thought he'd lost. People who'd disappeared when Victoria started her campaign were suddenly coming back, offering support, adding their own stories of suspicion and concern. The truth was a wildfire, and it was spreading. At 9 p.m., the FBI issued a statement. They were investigating allegations of fraud, false imprisonment, and attempted murder. At 9:30, Victoria was taken into custody outside her Manhattan penthouse. Whitney watched the footage, Victoria's perfect face twisted with rage, her designer dress wrinkled from being grabbed by federal agents, her voice shrill as she screamed about her lawyers and her rights and how this was all a mistake. Richard watched, too, his expression unreadable. "How do you feel?" Whitney asked gently. "I don't know," he admitted. "Relieved, angry, sad. She was my wife. I loved her once. Or I thought I did. Maybe I never really knew her at all. Maybe people change. Or maybe they just reveal who they always were." Richard looked at her. "Which one do you think I am?" Whitney thought about the man in the rain, the man who'd been afraid and lost and desperate, the man who'd hidden evidence because some part of him knew he needed to fight, the man who'd protected her even when it would have been easier to let her go. "I think you're someone who forgot who he was," she said, and then remembered at exactly the right time. Richard smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she'd found him. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "With the company? With everything?" "Now we rebuild," Richard said. "The right way. Honestly. With people who actually care about more than just profit." He looked at his son. "Starting with you, if you'll come back." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Not as your heir, not as your successor, but as your partner. Someone who can help make sure we never lose sight of what actually matters." "Deal." They shook hands, father and son, broken and healing. Whitney stood to leave. "I should go. Let you two—" "Wait." Richard stood too. "Where will you go?" Back to her apartment that had been invaded, back to her job that she'd lied to, back to her life that would never be the same. "I don't know," she admitted. "Stay," Richard said. "Not here. Not with us. But let me help you. You lost everything because of me. Your safety. Your privacy. Your—" "I didn't lose anything," Whitney interrupted. "I chose. I chose to stop. I chose to help. I chose to see you when everyone else looked away." She smiled. "And I'd choose it again." "Then let me repay that choice. However you need. Whatever you want. Name it." Whitney thought about the student loans, the exhaustion, the invisible weight of trying to survive in a world that didn't see her. But mostly she thought about her grandmother's words. Be brave when it matters most. "I want to go back to school," she said. "Finish my degree. Become a nurse practitioner. Help people who can't afford care. Make a real difference." "Done," Richard said immediately. "Full scholarship, whatever school you want. And when you graduate, if you want to work at a clinic or a hospital or start your own practice, we'll fund it. All of it." "Richard, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do. Because you saved my life. You risked everything for a stranger in the rain. That deserves more than a thank you. That deserves the world." His eyes were fierce with gratitude. "Let me give you the chance to do what you're meant to do. Please." Whitney felt tears on her cheeks. "Okay. Yes." Thank you. He pulled her into a hug, not the desperate grip of a drowning man, but the embrace of a friend, of family. Thank you, he whispered again. For stopping, for seeing me, for reminding me what it means to be human. When they pulled apart, Marcus was watching them both with something like wonder. You know this is going to be everywhere, right? He said. The story, the nurse who saved a billionaire, the unlikely hero. You're going to be famous. Whitney's stomach dropped. I don't want to be famous. Then we'll protect you, Richard said. Keep your name out of it as much as possible. But the truth is, you are a hero, whether you want to be or not. A hero. Whitney Clark, who'd been invisible her whole life, who'd been overlooked and dismissed and ignored. Now she was a hero. It didn't feel real. But then again, none of this felt real. Her phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor at the hospital. Saw the news, are you okay? Call me when you can. Another from a number she didn't recognize. Book deal? Interested? Another. Interview request. Good morning, America. And another. You're amazing. Thank you for being brave. The messages kept coming. Dozens. Hundreds. All because she'd stopped in the rain. All because she'd chosen to see. 3 months later, Whitney stood in a lecture hall at Boston University, taking notes on advanced pharmacology. Her student loans were paid off. Her apartment, a new one, safe and quiet, was fully furnished. Her grandmother's medical bills, even though she was gone, were settled. Richard had kept every promise. And then some. They didn't talk often. He was busy rebuilding his company, testifying at Victoria's trial, repairing relationships with Marcus and everyone else Victoria had driven away. But every few weeks he'd text. How are classes? Need anything? Thank you. Still, always. And Whitney would smile and text back that she was fine, that she was good, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Because she was. The story had gone viral, just like Marcus predicted. Nurse Saves Billionaire Lost in Rain had been the headline everywhere. Her face had been on morning shows and news sites and social media. For a few weeks, she'd been famous. And then, like all stories, it faded. Other news took over. Other heroes emerged. Whitney became invisible again. But this time, it felt like a choice, like freedom. She wasn't invisible because she didn't matter. She was invisible because she'd chosen a quiet life over a public one, chosen purpose over fame, chosen to help people one at a time instead of being a symbol for everyone. After class, she stopped at a coffee shop. While waiting in line, she noticed an old woman sitting alone at a table, her hands shaking, her eyes confused. Everyone walked past her, too busy, too preoccupied, too willing to not see. Whitney walked over and sat down. Are you okay? She asked gently. Can I help you with something? The woman looked up, and in her eyes, Whitney saw the same thing she'd seen in Richard's. Relief, gratitude, hope. I'm lost, the woman whispered. I don't remember how I got here. Whitney smiled and took her hand. It's okay, she said. I've got you. And she did. Because some people stop. Some people see. Some people choose to care when it would be easier not to. And that choice, that simple, impossible choice, changes everything. For everyone. Richard Cross stood in front of the Cross Foundation building, newly renamed, newly focused. Not on profit, but on purpose. Medical research, mental health care, support for nurses and caregivers, programs to help people who'd been made invisible by society. All of it funded by the fortune he'd almost lost, the empire Victoria had tried to steal. Beside him stood Marcus, now the foundation's director. And beside Marcus stood Jennifer Walsh, the journalist who'd broken the story. And beside Jennifer stood Whitney Clark, invited to the dedication ceremony for the Foundation's first project, a free medical clinic in the neighborhood where she'd grown up, named after her grandmother. "Ready?" Richard asked her. Whitney looked at the building, at the people already gathering, people who needed care, who'd been ignored, who deserved to be seen. "Ready," she said. They cut the ribbon together. 4 people brought together by rain and kindness and a choice to stop when everyone else kept walking. The cameras flashed, the crowd applauded, the world watched. But Whitney was already looking past them, already seeing the patients waiting, the work to be done, the people who needed someone to care. That evening, after everyone left, Richard found Whitney sitting alone in the empty clinic. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different everything is," she said. "6 months ago, I was just trying to survive, and now you're changing lives. We're changing lives." She looked at him. "All of us. Together. Because someone chose to stop." Richard sat beside her. "I never thanked you properly, for that moment, for seeing me. You've thanked me every day for 6 months. It's not enough." "It will never be enough." He was quiet for a moment. "I could have died in that rain, or spent the rest of my life locked in Victoria's facility, losing pieces of myself until there was nothing left. But you stopped. And because you stopped, I got a second chance. Marcus got his father back. Victoria's victims got justice, and now hundreds of people will get the care they deserve." He smiled. "All because one nurse decided that an old man in the rain mattered." Whitney felt tears prick her eyes. "He did matter. You did. So did you. So do they." Richard gestured toward the empty waiting room that would soon be filled with patients. "Every single person who walks through those doors matters, and they'll know it because you'll see them, really see them, the way you saw me." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "Victoria's trial starts next week," Richard said quietly. "Are you ready to testify?" Whitney nodded. "I am. Are you?" "I think so. Marcus will be there. Jennifer's been helping us prepare, and my lawyers say the evidence is overwhelming." He paused. "She'll probably spend the rest of her life in prison. How do you feel about that?" Richard considered. "Sad. Not for her. For who I thought she was. For the years I lost believing in someone who never existed." He looked at Whitney. "But mostly I feel grateful. Because if she hadn't done what she did, I never would have ended up in that rain. Never would have met you. Never would have remembered what actually matters." "That's a terrible way to find gratitude," Whitney said with a small smile. "Maybe, but it's the truth." Richard stood, offering her his hand. "Come on, let me buy you dinner, a real dinner, not gas station sandwiches." Whitney laughed and took his hand. "Deal." They walked out together into the evening air. The city was alive around them. People rushing home, lights flickering on, life continuing in its endless, chaotic way. Somewhere in that crowd, someone was lost. Someone was scared. Someone was invisible and desperate and hoping someone would stop. And somewhere else, someone would. Because that's what people do. The good ones. The brave ones. The ones who understand that kindness isn't weakness and compassion isn't foolishness, and stopping for a stranger in the rain might just save 2 lives instead of 1. Whitney graduated top of her class. Richard and Marcus were in the audience, cheering louder than anyone when she crossed the stage. So were her colleagues from the hospital, her professors, and dozens of patients from the clinic who'd insisted on coming to support the nurse who'd supported them. After the ceremony, Richard pulled her aside. "I have something for you," he said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a key. "What's this?" Whitney asked. "The clinic. It's yours. Fully funded, fully staffed. You can run it however you want, help whoever you want, build whatever vision you have. Richard smiled. You saved my life. Now I'm giving you the means to save thousands more. Whitney stared at the key. Richard, I can't. You can. You will, because that's who you are. He squeezed her shoulder. The woman who stops. The woman who sees. The woman who changes everything just by caring. Whitney threw her arms around him, holding tight. Thank you. For everything. For trusting me. For being someone worth trusting, Richard finished. Now go. You have patients waiting. The Clark Community Health Center had grown from 1 clinic to 5, from Whitney's neighborhood to neighborhoods across the city, from dozens of patients to thousands. Whitney stood in her office, modest, practical, covered in children's drawings and thank you cards, and looked out at the waiting room below. It was full, always full. People who needed care, people who'd been ignored by a system that didn't see them, people who were now being seen, being helped, being saved. Her phone rang. Richard. Turn on the news, he said. Whitney grabbed the remote. On the screen, a breaking news banner. Victoria Cross denied parole. Will serve full 25-year sentence. It's really over, Richard said. She's gone. For good. Whitney thought about that. About the woman who'd tried to erase a man's identity, who'd drugged him, manipulated him, tried to steal everything he'd built, who'd sent people to hurt Whitney, to silence the truth. I don't feel happy about it, Whitney admitted. I feel tired. Like we've been carrying this weight for so long and now it's finally gone. That's exactly what it is, Richard said. But now we get to use that energy for something better, something that actually matters. Speaking of which, the new clinic opens next month, in your old neighborhood like you wanted. Good. That's good. Richard paused. Thank you, Whitney, for all of this, for everything you've built. You've saved more lives than I ever could. We saved each other, Whitney said simply. That's how this works. After they hung up, Whitney returned to the waiting room. There was a young woman there, maybe 20, hunched in a chair, her face streaked with tears. Everyone walked past her, too busy with their own problems, too overwhelmed to notice one more person in pain. Whitney walked over and sat beside her. Hi, she said gently. I'm Whitney. Are you okay? The woman looked up, and in her eyes Whitney saw everything she'd seen 5 years ago in Richard's. Fear, desperation, the desperate hope that someone would care. I'm lost, the woman whispered. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. Whitney took her hand. You're not lost anymore, she said. You're here, and we're going to help you. I promise. The woman started crying. Not from sadness, but from relief. Because someone had stopped. Someone had seen. Someone had cared enough to ask if she was okay. And that simple act, that choice to see another human being in their moment of need, was everything. Whitney helped the woman to her feet, guided her to an examination room, and began the work she was born to do. Saving lives. One person at a time. One moment of kindness at a time. One choice to stop when everyone else kept walking. And somewhere in Manhattan, Richard Cross sat in his office, smaller now, simpler, focused on purpose rather than power, and smiled. Because 5 years ago, he'd been a ghost in the rain, and one woman had chosen to see him, had chosen to save him, had chosen to remind him that wealth and power meant nothing compared to compassion and courage and the simple act of giving a damn about another human being. That choice had changed his life, and through him, it had changed thousands more. All because Whitney Clark had stopped. All because she'd seen an old man when everyone else looked away. All because she'd taken his hand and refused to let go. And in the end, that's all any of us can do. Stop, see, care, and trust that kindness, simple, impossible, revolutionary kindness, will change the world, one person at a time. Whitney Clark stood at a podium in front of thousands of people. The National Healthcare Hero Award, the highest honor in her field, presented to her for 15 years of service, for building a network of clinics that had served over 500,000 patients, for training hundreds of nurses and doctors who'd gone on to serve communities across the country, for changing everything. Richard Cross sat in the front row, older now, his silver hair fully restored, his eyes bright with pride. Beside him sat Marcus and his family, a wife, 2 children, a life built on purpose and meaning. And beside them sat dozens of people whose lives Whitney had touched, saved, transformed. Whitney looked out at the crowd and thought about a rainy night 15 years ago, about a choice that seemed so small at the time, about an old man who'd needed someone to see him, and about everything that had come from that single moment of compassion. She began her speech. 15 years ago, I was running late for work, she said. I was tired. I was broke. I was drowning in my own problems. And I saw an old man standing in the rain, lost, confused, completely invisible to everyone walking past. The room was silent. I almost kept walking. I had every reason to keep walking, but something made me stop. And that choice, that simple, impossible choice, changed both our lives forever. She looked at Richard. He nodded, his eyes wet with tears. We live in a world that teaches us to walk past each other, to mind our own business, to protect ourselves first, to not get involved. Whitney's voice grew stronger. But I'm here tonight to tell you that stopping, truly seeing another human being in their moment of need, is the most powerful thing any of us can do. Applause rippled through the crowd. You don't need to be rich to make a difference. You don't need power or influence or resources. You just need to be willing to see, to care, to stop when everyone else keeps walking. More applause. People were standing now. So tonight, I'm not accepting this award for me. I'm accepting it for every person who's ever chosen compassion over convenience. Who's ever stopped for a stranger, who's ever refused to let another human being be invisible. The room erupted, a standing ovation that went on and on. Whitney looked out at all those faces, people who dedicated their lives to helping others, to seeing the invisible, to making the world better, one small act of kindness at a time. And she felt it. The truth that had lived in her heart since that rainy night 15 years ago. We're all just one choice away from changing everything. One moment of kindness away from saving a life. One decision to stop away from discovering our purpose. All we have to do is see each other, really see each other, and care enough to help. After the ceremony, Whitney found Richard outside in the cool evening air. I'm proud of you, he said simply. More than you'll ever know. I'm proud of us, Whitney corrected. Look what we built. Look what we did. All because you were brave enough to run and I was foolish enough to stop. Richard laughed. Best foolish decision anyone ever made. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching people stream out of the building. Doctors and nurses and caregivers and patients. People whose lives had been touched by the ripple effect of one rainy night. One moment of compassion. One choice to see. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd kept walking? Whitney asked. Every day, Richard admitted. And every day I'm grateful you didn't. Me too. They watched a young nurse help an elderly patient down the stairs, holding her arm, moving slowly, making sure she was safe. Stopping, seeing, caring, the cycle continuing. That's your legacy, Richard said. Not the clinics or the awards or the lives you've saved directly. It's them. All those people who learned from your example, who chose to stop because you showed them how. Whitney smiled. That's our legacy. Yours and mine. Together. Together, Richard agreed. And somewhere in the city, in hundreds of cities, in thousands of moments happening right now, someone was stopping for someone else. Someone was seeing someone who'd been invisible. Someone was caring when it would have been easier not to. All because 15 years ago, a nurse named Whitney Clark had stopped in the rain, had taken an old man's hand, and had reminded the world what it means to be human. Whitney Clark was 73 years old when she finally retired. The Clark Community Health Network had grown to 47 clinics across 15 states, over 2 million patients served, hundreds of lives saved, thousands of healthcare workers trained in the philosophy that had started it all. Stop. See. Care. Richard Cross had passed away 2 years earlier, peacefully, surrounded by his family. He'd left his entire fortune to the foundation he and Whitney had built together. Marcus now ran the organization, carrying on his father's work with the same dedication and purpose that had defined the last quarter century of the Cross family legacy. Whitney attended Richard's funeral, of course, gave a eulogy that had everyone in tears, talked about a rainy night and a lost old man and a choice that had changed the world. He was invisible that night, she'd said, and I made him visible again. But the truth is, he did the same for me. He saw me when I couldn't see myself. He believed in me when I had no reason to believe. And together we proved that kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest force in the universe. Now, on her last day of work, Whitney walked through the original clinic one final time. It had been renovated, expanded, modernized. But the heart of it remained the same. The waiting room where she'd helped thousands of patients. The examination rooms where she'd saved lives. The office where she'd planned and dreamed and built something bigger than herself. On the wall hung a photograph. Faded now, but still clear. Whitney and Richard, taken the day the first clinic opened. Both of them smiling. Both of them knowing they'd found something rare and precious. Purpose. Partnership. The knowledge that they'd made a difference. You ready to go? Whitney turned. Her assistant, a young nurse named Maria who reminded Whitney so much of her younger self, stood in the doorway. Almost, Whitney said. Just saying goodbye. Maria walked over and looked at the photograph. Is it true? The story about how you met Mr. Cross? Every word. That you just stopped? In the rain? For a complete stranger? Whitney smiled. That's all it was. That's all it took. That's incredible. That's humanity, Whitney corrected gently. That's what we're capable of when we choose to see each other. They walked out together. Outside, the clinic was bustling, patients coming and going, nurses and doctors doing their work, lives being changed, people being saved. All because 25 years ago, someone stopped. Whitney got into her car, still a modest Honda, though newer now, and drove home through the city. And on the way, she saw him, an old man, standing on a corner, looking lost, looking scared. Everyone walking past, no one stopping. Whitney pulled over, got out of the car, walked up to him. Excuse me, she said gently. Are you okay? Can I help you? The man looked at her with tears in his eyes. I don't know where I am, he whispered. I don't know how to get home. Whitney took his hand. It's okay, she said. I've got you. And she did. Because some lessons last a lifetime. Some choices become who we are. And some moments of kindness echo forever. Whitney helped the man find his family, made sure he got home safely, gave him her clinic's card in case he ever needed help again. And then she went home herself, feeling that familiar warmth in her chest, the same warmth she'd felt 25 years ago in the rain, the same knowledge that she'd done something that mattered. She'd stopped, she'd seen, she'd cared, and tomorrow someone else would too. And the day after that, someone else. The ripple effect continuing forever, spreading outward in infinite circles, touching lives in ways no one could measure or predict. All because, once upon a time, a nurse decided that an old man in the rain deserved to be seen. That simple choice, that impossible, beautiful, revolutionary choice, to stop when everyone else kept walking, to see when everyone else looked away, to care when it would have been easier not to. That's the story. That's always been the story. And it will keep being the story, told and retold, lived and relived, as long as there are people willing to choose compassion over convenience. As long as there are people willing to stop. Whitney Clark went to bed that night, knowing her life had mattered, knowing she'd made a difference, knowing that the world was better because she'd been in it, and knowing that the best legacy anyone can leave is the simple lesson: see each other, help each other, love each other, stop for each other, because in the end, that's all we have, that's all we are, that's all that matters: each other. In a world that teaches us to walk past each other, the most revolutionary act is to stop. Whitney Clark.